10 seconds.
Carrots, peas, and succotash. Looks like you're having a conversation if you say those words.
I'm Bruce Apar, and unless you're very distracted, you're watching Frank Talks with Bruce the Blog. Welcome to Frank Talks with Bruce the Blog. My co-host Frank J. Rich, as you can see, I'm not a magician, he's really not here. But he will be back as soon as he can do all of the things that he has to get done at Chase Media Group, which is the parent company of the Penny Saver and produces the show every week. So we thank Chase Media Group and its CEO Carla Chase and Frank J. Rich, who is one of the owners of the company, for putting us up every week on the show. And just very quickly, if you haven't seen the show, Frank Talks with Bruce the Blog, it's a weekly community affairs show that is obviously on the channel you're watching, but it's also on YouTube, and you can find it by going to YouTube and just searching for Town Link TV or NCN Local TV, and you'll see all the shows that we've been doing since actually June of 2011. Wow, it's going to be 2 years coming up soon. And we just always want to showcase interesting, sometimes unique things, and certainly people that are in the community that you may not know about. Some of them maybe you do know. And what's going on that's really positive and sometimes inspiring in the communities that we reach. And this week we have something that is unique, I think, actually, that does qualify as unique. And to get into that, we want to welcome our guests, David Levin, David, and Tricy Cushner.
Thank
Tricy,
you, Bruce.
thanks for being here. And David and Tricy are behind a project that's taking place in Yorktown and actually is about Yorktown, and that's an independent film that has at least the working title of Hang Tough, Paul Mather, based on a young adult novel. And actually, David, that's a good question. Is that the working title, or maybe would there be a different title when the movie comes out? Or?
I can't imagine there would be a different title.
Okay, so you do want to go with the, yeah, but that happens, right? They have,
it happens.
In production, you have a working title and maybe the title changes.
I think that the people who are familiar with the book are going to recognize that name, and it's going to mean something to them.
Yeah, no, that's true. So both of you, of course, live in Yorktown. You're Yorktowners. And by the way, how long? How long have you lived in Yorktown?
Approaching 10 years.
Oh, okay, right. Well, what about you, Tricy?
I've lived here for 12 years now.
Oh, so you're like Aravistes.
I feel like that.
Yeah, I've been there a whole 20 years. Also, I'm an Araviste as well. But I think, like a lot of people who live in this whole region, and in this case in Yorktown in particular, people come here. It's a great area for young families, just for lots of reasons. Recreation, sports, the school systems, just the beautiful, surroundings, environment that we're in, and everything that's available to us. And in effect, David, the reason that you wanted to make this movie in Yorktown is to maybe not just about Yorktown, but specifically it's standing in for a lot of towns to convey that community feeling. Right?
Yes, and I think to show a community and to make a project in Yorktown that can also possibly benefit the community.
Right. So then how do you see that possibly happening, how the independent movie would benefit the community?
Well, I mean, I've been directing television commercials for 12, 13, 14 years now. And so I've seen firsthand that when a production goes to a very specific location, and is shooting on location like that, that a lot of the money finds its way into the community because you need services, you need people, you need food, you need to feed everybody.
Right.
And there's a lot of ways that I was hoping by doing the project in Yorktown that the town itself could benefit in the process. That it could be fun and exciting, but also that there'd be putting back into the community as well.
And Tricy, you're well known in Yorktown because you do a lot of great charitable activities, and will head various groups, and so how did you become involved? I mean, you're a producer on the movie, right?
That is correct, yes.
I mean, I won't ask you to list your producer credits.
No.
No, but seriously, how did you become involved with David?
And I actually, without a doubt, became involved because of my love for this community and for the families and exactly the things you were talking about that exist in Yorktown. That I couldn't agree with you more. And when David, 2 years ago, I've known David and his family for several years, and before I ever knew anything about his artistry, there's an integrity, there's something that I've always, the first ones to volunteer and help and to love the same community I love. So when he came and started talking about a project that would take place in Yorktown and would highlight the areas that you walk around, that the ballparks, it's the gatherings, all of the street fairs, the things that we feel that exist in Yorktown that you don't always find in other communities. And the most important thing is that as we spoke, you realized this entire film was going to end up creating it was going to create a love for a community, and a community's caring about a family, and I know we said we've been 12 years, 10 years. From the day that I stepped, the first time I ever walked into Yorktown and sat at a soccer game, I said, these are the schools I want my children to go to. This is where I want to live. These are the people that were around. These are the families I would like to be around. And I could relate as this family that David talked about within the book, as they become part of the community. That's exactly how I felt. And I can't imagine a more wonderful project that would end. From the minute he spoke, it was never about what this project could do financially. It was all about what could it do for our community, and if there were any benefits, what could those turn around and come back and do for our families. And I love that approach.
Yeah, no, and I think it appeals to almost anybody that you describe it to, actually. But David, for a second, I just do want to go back to the fact that you have been directing TV commercials for some very big clients, right? Brand names that people would be very familiar with, including, we should just mention, right? A&P and Dunkin' Donuts, Visa, ESPN, Excedrin, and I know we've talked about this before in other venues. You did that one spot with Ben Stiller, who just coincidentally lives in Yorktown now. Right?
Yeah, that was a short film for the VH1 Fashion Awards years ago.
It was sort of a comic.
It was a parody of the Gap television commercials from years ago.
So, I mean, and of course it's not at all unusual that TV commercial directors will go into feature filmmaking. I mean, how much of a difference is there once you get beyond, obviously, the length? I mean, you have actors, you have a script, right?
I think the main differences are going to become more and more apparent the closer you get. I'm used to dealing with, I suppose, more money per day, let's put it that way, because the shoots I'm used to working on are 1, 2, maybe 4 or 5 day shoots, and that's it. So you have a couple of weeks of prep, and you get everything done in a couple of days, and then the project is basically done. Some editing. This is a much bigger, longer season, as it were. A 4 or 5 week shoot, 5 days a week. It's
intense, right?
Yeah, there's a lot. It's a marathon, and so you have to pace yourself, and you have to have different expectations. And commercial shoots have less screen time to deal with and more shooting time. So in a day, 2 days, you can shoot 1 or 2 30-second commercials, and you have leeway to really consider everything, review every shot after it's done. And in this type of a project,
facto.
You can't do that.
You gotta know what you want, plan everything to the nth degree, and then get everything you need. And so as we start to look at the schedule and how to break it down and start thinking about the actual production period, I think the differences really are starting to reveal themselves.
Parents, yes, right. And what about how you settled on this particular story in this book? Because the book is from, what is it, the 70s, was it?
The book was published in 1973.
73, yeah, right.
Hang Tough, Paul Mather.
40 years old.
By Alfred Sloat.
Right.
And yes, I think that's how I came to this book, was because it's 40 years old. And so this was the type of story that I suppose people who are now my age would have read when they were young. Yeah. And I was looking for a book, I was looking for a project that could be shot in Yorktown. The idea to shoot a film in Yorktown was actually the first thing. Right. That was the first step in the process, to create something, to create it locally, to be able to give back to the community in a sense by doing it. And then I just needed the right idea, the right project. And I've read a lot of children's books, young adult books. As my kids grow up and they read things that they like, I'll read them too.
Right.
And so I had a couple other ideas, and then a friend of mine suggested this book to me, and as soon as he told me what it was about and some of the themes of the book, I thought of Yorktown, I thought of Relay for Life, I thought of Tricy. It all became very easy and apparent to me that that was going to be the right thing. Right. Before I had even read it, I took it out from the John C. Hart Library, and I was not disappointed. Right. Every page, every chapter, it was becoming more and more apparent that it was going to be this book.
And did you tell me that were you in touch with the author? Is he still alive? Or?
He is. Right. I was in touch with the author.
Alfred Sloat.
Alfred Sloat. Yeah. I was in touch with him early in the process. Right. Really before we even were serious about it, but just to look into it before I got too committed to it. I wanted to make sure that he was willing and that the rights were available and all that. And I sent him a long email describing my plan for it and to make it about the community, to shoot it in my community. And he really appreciated all that and liked the idea that he felt like it was a different way to try and make a movie, and that it made the movie maybe more than just a movie.
Right. And that made it much easier to get the rights to do it made the business part come after the personal part, and that's what you've done. Yeah. That's been David's approach through this whole project.
There's a fantastic profile of the author on a website called grantland.com. If you look up his name on that website, there's a little short film about another book that he wrote that a producer at ESPN remembered from when he was young, and so he wanted to make a film about that book and about him, and it's a little 10-minute documentary. It's a great portrait of him, and you see what a gentle, kind, and brilliant writer he is. Really. Right.
So Yorktown is a character, really, in this particular movie that you're making, and if I'm not mistaken, in the book, if I recall, I don't think he locates the town, does he? Does he?
He does. It's a town in Michigan.
Oh, he does say
and
that.
He lives in Michigan.
He does say Michigan. Okay.
He creates a town. Right. Arborville.
Okay,
town
Arborville.
In Michigan.
Right.
And he sets it there, and you get a sense, I think, in the book of the town, but it's not quite a character. I think when I read it, maybe I was adding to it as I was reading it in my own head. I saw it as a much more of a community story.
Right. Right. Well, no, what I would describe, if you've, people have been to Disney World or Disneyland, but because of my past career, I had the opportunity to be on studio lots like Warner or Fox, or, places like that. And at the Warner lot, they have this, suburban street, and when you see it, you go, "Oh my God, that's been in a million movies. I've seen these houses." And he, in the book, that's how I sort of pictured. Right. He was describing like a facade, a movie studio, neighborhood, really. Yes. Just very few details, just sort of painting a broad picture.
Well, I guess I was reading it with Yorktown in mind, so I was picturing Yorktown. Yeah.
Right, yeah, exactly.
From the way they enter town and they're driving through, and you immediately start describing what they're passing, and through the script, I feel like I've traveled Yorktown. I feel like I've walked onto the fields I know, into the schools I know.
Oh yeah, no, that,
and to the pizza places we know. It's so exciting to read a script.
I agree.
And to feel like you're walking in those steps.
Right. I mean, and that's, for people watching, this is what a movie script looks like, because it doesn't matter which movie it is, right? And as one of the things that really is interesting to people not involved in the movie industry is what you were talking about, David, that even the script and the size of the text is dictated, right? Everything has to be to a very specific tolerance, you might say.
There's a format, yeah.
Right. And that the other thing you were saying is that basically 1 page of a script translates to 1 minute of screen time, right? That's
the working theory, yes.
Pretty much the way it works. And in terms of, now this isn't, even if it was a final draft, this isn't what's necessarily called a shooting script, is it?
No, I guess a lot of the extraneous descriptions wouldn't be there. But I try to stick to those ideas when I write. I try to stick to only what you're going to see and what you're going to hear.
Right.
Because that's all you get when you're sitting in a movie theater, is what you're going to see and what you're going to hear. So I stay away from what people are thinking, unless it's voiceover, because we wouldn't really know that. And if there's if the only way to know that is where do they look, what's the expression on their face, then I try to describe that.
Right.
But I don't want to cheat and say that someone was feeling something, because that's I think.
Well, right. That's
It's hard to see feelings. And what was really neat was watching a script reading and hearing the children's voices as they are reading the actual script, and and the different coaches and the adults, and you can absolutely, when you're talking about what you can visualize and what you know, there's not a dry eye as you're hearing that.
And
there's parts where you laugh, there's parts where you get so excited and you're on the edge of your seat, and then there's parts where you're feeling so emotional, and it's a lot of it I felt like dealt with because it was in Yorktown, and it is about families. You can identify it with each character that's in the script, and it's so exciting.
I had the same reaction, Tricy, when I was reading the script, and you see, exterior, Yorktown High School, or Three Boys, or or of course.
Mitchell's
of course, my favorite exterior, Harrison Apar Field.
Yes, the Apar.
Which at the end I kept seeing in every, which was really great. And the length of time, you touched on it a little earlier, David, but you're planning it, was it 5 or 6 weeks? Is it going to be the length that you're actually shooting this?
Right now it's a 5-week shooting schedule, yes.
Right.
Possibly hopefully with an additional half-day minimal crew at Relay for Life.
Right.
Trying to include that, because that was one of the Yorktown events that really the story reminded me of and made me feel like was an important part of a story like this.
Right, and I don't know, we haven't really yet gone into detail on the story, have we?
No,
so
we have not.
We should convey what the basic narrative line is.
Yes, so it's a story about a family, and one of their sons has a disease, a rare blood disease, and he's also a fantastic baseball player. And it's the family's struggle as they contend with this disease and what it means about their relationships with each other. Obviously the parents go through their own experience of it. The boy goes through his own experience, his little brother. They all have their own experience of what it's like to live with this.
Right.
And on top of it all is his love for baseball, and he just wants to play, and he needs his doctor's permission, and there's a lot that goes into it that he doesn't want to necessarily wait around for, and his love of baseball maybe surpasses his need to follow the rules, and gets himself into a little bit of trouble. But but the two things that struck me the most about the book that I really wanted to tell in the story were not just his love of baseball, but his mastery of baseball. I can appreciate the game of baseball. I'm not a huge fan, but reading the baseball scenes in this book and many of Alfred Sloat's books make you appreciate the game and the detail and the subtlety and the nuance of what goes into playing the game of baseball. And those scenes, to me, were like the best baseball scenes in any of the classic baseball movies I've ever seen. And I thought, how fascinating that a kid's story like this, a family film, could have baseball scenes that could rival some of the great baseball movies. And I really liked that. And the other aspect was the way that he handled the disease and what it meant to the people involved, that it's not the same as what people might think who haven't gone through something like that, that he really got at what are the issues for Paul, who is the one who's sick, and how his parents won't let him do anything or are overprotective, but to him it doesn't feel like the love that is what it is, because to him it feels different because it's limiting him and they're treating him in a way that they won't let him live his life the way he wants to live it. And just those two topics in this one story, and the fact that the disease wasn't handled in a way where it needed necessarily closure. He didn't feel the need to have an end to the story. And I like that it was hang tough, Paul Mather. That's what
you're left hanging.
That's right.
So you're left hanging, and because that the family is hanging tough, and they've now got a support system and a community behind them, and that they're all in it together.
No, you're right. I mean that you know, I honestly can't say I thought of it exactly the way that you're describing it with your insight, but it is a really important message that what he's saying is not that the outcome doesn't matter, of course, but that what's really important is how people support you and help you, and that don't lose sight of that, no matter where it's going.
The quality of your environment, the quality of the community that you let, and that's amazing. And then one of the neatest things is reading this book, as we said, from 40 years ago, that included the doctor asking him to tape record and to do all these things to tell his story, and David was able to bring everything current, and not and the way that he's actually filming, and the way he's blogging, and the way he communicates, and it's so exciting to see it really. All of a sudden you see technology, and you see adolescence, and you see it's like there's so many things that he added to the book.
No, thanks for bringing that up, because when I was reading the script, it does jump out at you, the whole device that you use of the laptop that he always has with him in the hospital, and the blog, which at the end takes on a life of its own.
The little brother's flip camera that he catches certain moments. I love it.
So the beginning of the book, the first chapter, is called The Tape Recorder, and really it's about the doctor encouraging Paul in the time that he has to spend in the hospital to do something with that time, and to sort of record his story on a tape recorder. And who's even seen a tape recorder lately? But I liked that idea that it's really it's Paul telling the story. It's not the story being told about Paul. And it seemed perfect to make it contemporary, not try to play it as 1973, especially if we're making it about Yorktown today. So the tape recorder became a laptop, and the story became a blog, and a great piece of the story is the younger brother, who
Larry,
Larry,
the punk, as Paul calls him. So
well, that's still relevant.
That's
the word punk. I mean.
Brothers are always brothers.
And there was something that sort of went unspoken in the book, that was the fact that, as much as the brother seemed to be a bit of a pest to Paul, you always got the idea that he wasn't really, and that it was that he completely idolized his brother. And it seemed like a very easy way to fit that in, was that all the material that Paul would use in his blog would be these videos, that the younger brother always has this video camera around his neck, and so he's always picking it up, and he's always pointing, and he's videotaping the pizza they're eating, just all kinds of things as kids would do now with they carry around little cameras in their pockets all the time. But it's easy to do. And that became just a great vehicle, and hopefully a way to get that message across that is what's behind the brothers. You know, attitude is just complete love and adoration of his older brother, who he looks up to.
And Larry, in that respect, is sort of like a Greek chorus. There, you know.
But he's permitted to bring this information back through the technologies. And one of the neatest components of this whole project is David has the script actually starts almost at the end of the film, and you keep going back, and it's a kind of that Forrest Gump approach it was. It's so intriguing because as you realize you're going through the script, you're being drawn back and pulled back in, and then by the time you hit certain points and you realize everyone in the hospital room is on the edge of their seat wanting to know what happened. So it's almost the bench, like you always refer to it as the Forrest Gump bench.
Yes, he tells his story, and he tells his story.
Life is like a box of chocolates.
And you keep getting bits of the story and bits of the story until you actually catch up to the moment where he's telling the story, and you realize the story's not even over. Now where's it going to go from here? I've got everything. I've got all the background, and now what's going to happen? And so I like that structure, and that was in the book. And I just amplified it. I think a little bit.
Like very cinematic. And are you a fan, or probably have seen like movies that come to mind, like Sandlot or Little Big League or things like that?
I've seen a lot of those movies, and I think that was one of the things that struck me about the book was those stories that revolve around kids and baseball tend to treat baseball in a very kid way. And I like that this story treated baseball like something important and something intelligent and something a
more from the child's perspective.
From the child's perspective,
and he really is reading people. It's not even about the sport. He's reading every breath, every way they stand, and you realize there's a psychology or something that's behind the sport, and it's not like oh, he's on first base. It's like, watch the way he's leaning. He's going to do this, and it's there's a very adult perspective that's I will say that anyone who's looked at this script, any adult, you read it, you feel it, you never feel like you're reading a children's script.
You're right.
Never. And yet there's
nothing,
not a thing in there that a child wouldn't understand and also feel and enjoy.
Yes, I would love it if I could find more intelligent, clever, independent family films. I think movies for kids tend to attempt to be a little simpler or deal with simpler themes. Where these aren't simple themes, and it's not a simple story, but it can be a family film.
It doesn't have to have bad language.
I was just going to say, thank you. I was just going to say, like, it's what's so refreshing about it, and it does obviously go back to his book, and then the way you've treated the story in your film script. That there's no dirty jokes, there's no foul language, there's none of that nonsense.
It's almost a family film by default because it doesn't happen to contain anything that anyone might find inappropriate for younger audiences. It just happens not to.
That's true. Anyhow, so we do have to wrap up, and well, for the next time we have you on, maybe you'll be able to talk at that point about casting. But that was the next question I was going to ask: is would we recognize any names? Any names beyond Yorktown?
Well, that's the hope.
We'll
recognize names in both ways.
Yes, right. So, anyhow, thank you, David. Always a pleasure. Tricy,
thank you, Bruce.
Always fun to see you.
You too.
And we have been talking to David Levin and Tricy Cushner about Hang Tough, Paul Mather, an independent movie that will start shooting in July. Right?
I hope. This July, maybe.
God willing, this July in Yorktown. So if you're driving through and you see cameras and all kinds of stuff, that's why. Thanks for watching Frank Talks with Bruce the Blog. And remember, when Bruce the Blog listens, people talk. Thank you.